About a month ago, NATO invited me to its annual Cyber Coalition event in Tallinn, Estonia. It is NATO's flagship cybersecurity exercise, bringing in around 1,300 participants from allied and partner nations. It seemed like a unique opportunity, so I went to the airport, got on a plane at 3 p.m. local time, flew across the Atlantic, transferred planes a couple of times, and landed in Tallinn at 1 p.m. local. Total travel time, a super captivating 15 hours. The next day, I walked over to a building outside of the Estonian Ministry of Defense, where they welcomed me to the exercise. After relaxing in the media room for about an hour, I was then escorted upstairs where the exercise was happening. I spoke to some of the participants for about 10 minutes, mostly learning about what they do for their home militaries outside of this particular exercise. They then escorted me back to the media room, and we left the venue shortly thereafter. Over my short stay, I was not even allowed to record B-roll of the actual exercise. What you are watching now is generic B-roll that is approved for media use. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Gee, that sounds like a giant waste of time. Never mind that I did not even mention my 20-hour journey home. Well, don't worry about me. I had a bunch of other things planned while I was there. Perhaps you have already watched my video about this bronze soldier that, in a roundabout way, turned Estonia into a cybersecurity superpower. Plus, I have another video upcoming about a dilemma facing the Estonian Ministry of Defense on how to prepare for World War III. However, as for the exercise itself, I indeed learned nothing. But that is the point, and it tells us something broader about how NATO prepares to deal with any adversary, Russia or otherwise. Let's rewind a bit. Military exercises are super common, and they are by no means limited to the Western coalition. What you are watching here is one of Russia's largest and recurring exercises. Still, by comparison, NATO outpaces everyone in this field. Here are some more exercises that occurred roughly at the same time as the cyber exercise. And fortunately for all of us, these have more visual appeal, like German tanks storming into Lithuania. Goodness, that has a different connotation in 2026 than it did 85 years ago. Shows you just how far Western international security has evolved. Or how about Canadians leading a multinational coalition to practice defending Latvia? Still important, even if it does not sound nearly as threatening as the last one. Then there was the United States working on uncrewed aerial vehicles in Poland and Romania. Yep, the United States still participates despite what you might be hearing from edgy social media takes. And Romania being the popular country that it is, France was also practicing how to mobilize there around the same time. Now, these exercises are expensive to conduct, especially when you have North American troops flying across the Atlantic to participate. Forget about just the airfare and hotels. It is also a massive time sink. There is a reason why my channel went dark for more than a week in December. It is because I was walking around an Estonian Christmas market in the heart of Tallinn's historic district. So why pay for both direct costs and opportunity costs to run these exercises? Let me give you 3 explanations for why states do them, from most to least obvious. Then I will add 2 more reasons specific to alliances. The straightforward reason is because it makes sense to practice any important activity before doing it for real. You do not want your first taste for winter survival when it is 0 degrees and Russia is firing at you. You do not want to drive tanks through the Baltic countries for the first time when Russian soldiers have already started pouring over the border. You do not want to figure out how modern drone warfare works when an opposing drone swarm is already bearing down on you. I have tried that, and it did not work so well. But that's a story for another day. We are talking about the professionals here. So you have some dress rehearsals, screw up a ton while you are there, learn from your errors, and then do it right when it is crunch time. The second, and more subtle reason to conduct exercises is to signal your resolve to the enemy and commitment to defend one's interests. Again, these things cost money. Part of the return on investment is to increase military strength to perform better in an actual war. But remember that war is the result of bargaining failure. States tend to negotiate resolutions to most of their substantive disagreements. However, those settlements must be commensurate with the balance of military power, so those exercises remain helpful even if no one anticipates that a war will actually break out. To go a step further, though, one reason that bargaining fails is because one party underestimates another's willingness to pay costs to fight over what is in dispute. Case in point, and one that we have discussed on this channel previously, Putin believed on the eve of the invasion that Europe would not bother to help Kyiv resist Russian forces. And sure, there have been plenty of headaches regarding that support over 4 years of fighting, but the Kremlin's assessment was way off the mark. Well, one way that you can credibly communicate such resolve is by conducting these exercises. And what exempts them from our classic warning about watching what leaders say is that the costs associated with doing are substantial, like we just said. A Germany that has no interest in trying to defend Lithuania when push comes to shove would not bother to spend a ton of time and resources to practice defending Lithuania. That is, in part, why there has been a refocusing among NATO allies since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It is not enough to simply look at the numbers and conclude that Russia is no match for NATO. That calculation presupposes that all of NATO's allies' might is brought to bear against Russia. If Russia doubts that, then the numbers are irrelevant. In fact, failing to communicate resolve ultimately puts everyone in a worse position, where Russia invaded only because it anticipates that allies will stand pat. But they intervene instead. Estonia and the rest of NATO have to deal with the mess. Even Moscow is frustrated because the operation failed. Put differently, the absence of an exercise is revealing too. If Germany does not practice protecting Lithuania, it risks Russia inferring a lack of German resolve. Thus, this case is about manipulating opposing perceptions of how you internalize the costs of war. The third reason to conduct exercises is to publicly display capacity to your opponents. Here you are manipulating opposing perceptions about your ability to win the war, rather than your resolve to pay costs. For example, is Norway capable of defending itself in the middle of winter? Your knee-jerk reaction might be, well, yeah, of course they are. But think for a second how you form that perception. It likely has something to do with Norway repeatedly practicing winter combat and you seeing media like this before. However, the decision to conduct exercises to demonstrate capability is complicated. Remember, these things are still costly. Your choice to conduct an exercise depends on whether you believe that the value of what you will learn exceeds the costs of it. Here is where things get weird. Exercises can be a signal of strength or a signal of weakness, depending on the military technology. It is a signal of strength if a weaker type of military cannot adequately fix any problems it discovers, but a stronger type can. It is a signal of weakness if a stronger type already knows most of what it needs to know, so there is not much to gain. Meanwhile, a weaker type can learn a bunch, and it simultaneously has the capacity to make the corresponding improvements. More generally, the type of military that most wants to conduct an exercise is the type for which the exercise will be most pivotal, and that can vary from case to case. Alliances also have two unique reasons to conduct exercises. One is to exploit comparative advantages in the alliance. Earlier in this video, I alluded to that bronze soldier in Tallinn, which indirectly caused Estonia to become NATO's cybersecurity experts. Well, there is a reason that the cybersecurity exercise I attended is held in Estonia every year. It is where NATO has its cybersecurity center of excellence. NATO has a ton of those alliance-wide, allowing a particular country to exert more effort to be the best at that particular activity. Then they disseminate what they learn to the rest of the alliance. How do they do that? You guessed it, via exercise. It is an inherent advantage to have an alliance partner who can, for example, teach you everything that you need to know about winter combat. Wash, rinse, and repeat for 31 other countries, and that is how your alliance makes substantial gains. You are likely already familiar with this strategy because it is one of the main arguments for Ukraine's eventual entrance into NATO. We already know what the blue and yellow's expertise will be. But rather than me continuing to drone on about that, let's move on to the last point. Indeed, the final reason to conduct exercises is to make up for a major problem in alliances: interoperability. When you have 32 members, each with 32 unique ways of doing business, there are bound to be kinks in working together. NATO tries to be proactive in reducing these problems, hence the existence of an entire office that sets standards for basically everything, from ammunition production to written country codes. The problem is that you can only discover so many coordination problems without pretending like it is the real thing, putting cross-national teams in the field, and then seeing where things go wrong. Hence the need for military exercises. There is a significant downside to running exercises like these, however. Everyone else can also see your faults. That is exactly what happened with one of those aforementioned exercises that ran around the same time as my visit to Estonia, the so-called rapid mobilization to Romania, led by French forces. The basic premise of the exercise was that an unnamed country that is definitely not Russia attacked Romania, and France needed to deploy a large counterforce to stop it. With time of the essence, France took 10 days to get there. For comparison, it took Russia only 5 days to cross the Dnipro River and capture Kherson City. And yes, if an unnamed country that definitely is not Russia ever did stage an invasion of Romania, Western intelligence would pick up on some signs in advance. Allies would start making some pre-preparations. There would be more brainpower mobilized into anticipating and ironing out the kinks, and rigorous attention to following every law would fade into the background. But advertising a 10-day process still is not good. That is the risk of conducting an exercise. You may inadvertently reveal weakness to your enemy that you were not aware of. Note that this is different from the concern before, where you know that you are weak and the opponent knows that conducting any exercise at all is a sign of weakness. Now you are involuntarily revealing something that the other side can take advantage of. It is a tactical issue rather than a political issue. For example, before the exercise, the Kremlin's military planners may have been uncertain whether to plan a blitz invasion or opt for something more methodical. The former risks outrunning your own supply lines and ultimately backfiring, but it comes with the advantage of catching your opponent off guard. Well, the French exercise has put up a neon sign instructing the Kremlin that the blitz option is a golden opportunity that should not be passed up should it wish to invade. Now, consistent with the point from earlier, France will presumably learn from the exercise and respond faster than was the case during the exercise. But the whole affair still divulged information that, in an ideal world, France and Romania would have kept quiet. And that takes us back to Estonia. I attended the cybersecurity exercise there. I saw effectively nothing. But that was the point. Because I saw nothing, NATO's adversaries missed out as well. Consequently, NATO racked up most of the benefits of a military exercise without any of the drawbacks. It still signaled resolve, because everyone can see the expense that went into running the exercise, even if the exercise itself was not visible. NATO still got to learn from all of the mistakes that it made over the course of the exercise, so that it will not repeat those mistakes when push comes to shove. The other 31 members all got the benefit from Estonia's expertise in cybersecurity. The Allies learned where interoperability problems arise in this domain and can now address them. And Russia did not learn where the weak points of the alliance are. The only downside here is that NATO did not get to publicly flex its strengths either, but hey, no strategy is spotless. And that is how I ended up walking the streets of Tallinn, trying to figure out other ways to productively spend my 3 nights there. Speaking of which, right now you can learn more about my visit to the Bronze Soldier of Tallinn, which inadvertently caused Estonia to become a cybersecurity powerhouse. And soon I will be back from Estonia to discuss a major problem in deciding how to prepare for World War III. But for now, if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.